Here's everything you thought you knew about Coca-Cola's secret formula and why it's all completely wrong. You've heard the story. The most guarded recipe in corporate history. Locked in a vault, protected by layers of security. Only 2 people alive know the complete formula at any given time. It's the greatest trade secret ever kept. Except, here's what nobody tells you. The man who created Coca-Cola never actually patented it. And the reason why reveals one of the most fascinating strategic decisions in business history. This is the story of John Pemberton, a morphine-addicted pharmacist from Georgia who accidentally created the most valuable beverage formula on Earth, and then made a choice that would define how companies protect their secrets for the next century and beyond. Let me take you back to Atlanta, Georgia, 1886. The city is recovering from the Civil War, the economy is struggling, and in a small laboratory behind a house on Marietta Street, a 55-year-old man is mixing chemicals, trying to create something that will save his life. John Stith Pemberton wasn't always desperate. Before the war, he was successful. He ran a prosperous drugstore. He manufactured medicines. He had a good reputation as a skilled pharmacist and chemist. But then the war came, and everything changed. In April 1865, just weeks before the war ended, Pemberton was slashed across the chest with a saber during the Battle of Columbus. The wound was severe. The pain was unbearable. And like so many wounded soldiers of his era, Pemberton was given morphine for the pain. Lots of morphine. By the time his wound healed, he was addicted. This is where most people think they know the story. They think Pemberton created Coca-Cola as a hangover cure, or as a brain tonic, or as some kind of medicinal drink. But the truth is darker and more desperate. Pemberton was trying to cure himself. He was searching for something that could break his morphine addiction without the agonizing withdrawal symptoms that made quitting impossible. For years, he experimented. He tried different combinations of herbs, chemicals, and extracts. He was particularly interested in coca leaves, the South American plant that indigenous people had been chewing for centuries to combat fatigue and hunger. European doctors were just beginning to study coca's properties, and early reports suggested it might be useful for treating morphine addiction. But here's what makes Pemberton's situation even more complicated. In the 1880s, there was no FDA, no regulation of medicines, no quality control. Anyone could make any claim about any product. The market was flooded with so-called potent medicines, elixirs and tonics that promised to cure everything from tuberculosis to impotence. Most of them were complete garbage. Many were just alcohol mixed with sugar and maybe some herbs. Some were actually dangerous. Pemberton knew this world well. He had already created several patent medicines himself. French wine coca was his most successful product before Coca-Cola. It was a mixture of coca leaves and wine, marketed as a nerve tonic and stimulant. And it sold pretty well, especially among the upper classes who could afford it. But in 1886, Atlanta passed prohibition laws. Suddenly, Pemberton couldn't sell an alcohol-based medicine anymore. He needed to reformulate. He needed to create something without alcohol that would still deliver the effects people wanted. Something that would still give them energy, lift their mood, make them feel better. So he went back to his laboratory, and he started experimenting with a new formula. This is where the story gets really interesting, because what Pemberton created wasn't just a new medicine. It was something nobody had quite made before. He took coca leaf extract, mixed it with cola nut extract, which contains caffeine, added some citric acid for tartness, mixed in some sugar for sweetness, and created a syrup. Then he discovered something crucial. When you mixed this syrup with carbonated water, it didn't just taste good. It tasted incredible. His bookkeeper, Frank Robinson, came up with the name. Coca-Cola. 2 C's. It would look good in advertising. Robinson also designed the flowing script logo that's still used today. And on May 8, 1886, Coca-Cola was first sold at Jacob's Pharmacy in Atlanta. 5 cents a glass. But here's what almost nobody knows. The formula Pemberton created in 1886 wasn't the formula we know today. It wasn't even close. Pemberton kept changing it, tweaking it, adjusting the ratios, adding new ingredients, removing others. He was still experimenting, still trying to find the perfect combination, and he was running out of time. Pemberton's morphine addiction was getting worse. His health was failing. He needed money desperately. So he started doing something that would create chaos for decades to come. He started selling shares of the Coca-Cola formula to different people. Not the company itself, not a patent. Shares of the formula. The rights to manufacture and sell it. Think about how insane this is. Imagine if the recipe for Coca-Cola wasn't owned by one company, but by multiple people who all claimed they had the right to make and sell it. That's exactly what happened. Pemberton sold shares to at least 4 different people in 1886 and 1887. Each one thought they owned a piece of Coca-Cola. Each one thought they had the right to manufacture it. This is where we need to talk about patents. Because this is the moment when Pemberton should have filed for a patent. This is when conventional wisdom says you protect your invention. You go to the patent office. You file the paperwork. You describe your formula in detail. You get legal protection for 17 years, which in 1886 was the length of a patent term, but Pemberton never did it. And the question that has fascinated business historians for over a century is simple. Why not? Let me give you the answer that most people believe. They think Pemberton was too sick, too poor, too addicted to think clearly. They think he simply made a mistake. That if he had been healthier or smarter or more business savvy, he would have patented the formula and everything would have been different. But I'm going to tell you why that answer is wrong, and why Pemberton's decision, whether intentional or not, turned out to be absolutely brilliant. Here's the problem with patents. When you patent something, you have to disclose exactly how it's made. You have to describe your formula in enough detail that someone skilled in the field could recreate it. That's the whole point of the patent system. You get temporary legal protection in exchange for sharing your knowledge with the world. After your patent expires, anyone can use your formula. Now think about that in the context of 1886. Patent terms were 17 years. If Pemberton had patented Coca-Cola in 1886, the patent would have expired in 1903. At that point, any competitor could have legally copied the exact formula. They could have made their own version of Coca-Cola, and Pemberton, or his successors, couldn't have done anything about it. But there's an even bigger problem. In 1886, patent enforcement was weak. The courts were inconsistent. If someone in another state started making a copycat version of your patented product, you had to sue them. You had to prove infringement. You had to have money for lawyers. And even if you won, enforcement was difficult. The infringer might just change the formula slightly and keep selling. Pemberton knew all of this. He had been in the patent medicine business for years. He had seen countless products copied, reformulated, and sold under different names. Patents offered very little real protection in his industry. But here's what a trade secret offered. If you could keep your formula completely confidential, if nobody except you knew exactly what was in it, then nobody could copy it. Not legally, not practically. They could try to reverse engineer it, sure. But if your formula was complex enough, if you used ingredients in precise ratios that were hard to detect, they would never get it quite right. And more importantly, a trade secret never expires. As long as you can keep it secret, it's protected forever. Not for 17 years, not for 50 years. Forever. This is the genius of what happened with Coca-Cola. Whether Pemberton understood it fully or not, by not patenting the formula, he created something far more valuable than temporary legal protection. He created perpetual mystery, but here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because Pemberton didn't live to see any of this play out. His health continued to decline through 1887 and 1888. His morphine addiction consumed him. He was desperate for money, and he kept selling pieces of Coca-Cola to anyone who would pay. By the time he died on August 16, 1888, at least 6 different people claimed they owned rights to Coca-Cola. The formula itself existed in multiple versions. Different manufacturers were making slightly different products, all under the Coca-Cola name. It was complete chaos. This is when Asa Griggs Candler enters the story. And this is when everything changes. Candler was a successful pharmacist and businessman in Atlanta. He had money, he had ambition, and he saw something in Coca-Cola that nobody else fully understood. He saw that the value wasn't in the product as it existed. The value was in the potential, in what it could become if someone took control and built it properly. So Candler started buying up all the rights to Coca-Cola. He tracked down everyone who claimed ownership. He negotiated. He threatened legal action. He was ruthless. And by 1891, he had acquired complete control of Coca-Cola for a total of about $2,300. Adjusted for inflation, that's around $75,000 today, for the formula that would become the most valuable brand in the world. It's one of the greatest business deals ever made. But here's what Candler understood that Pemberton never quite grasped. The formula itself wasn't the real asset. The secret was the real asset. The mystery was the real asset. The fact that nobody except a select few people knew exactly what was in Coca-Cola, that was what made it impossible to copy accurately. So Candler doubled down on secrecy. He implemented strict protocols. The formula was written down, but kept locked away. Only a handful of people ever saw it. The manufacturing process was compartmentalized. Different people handled different parts of the production. Nobody except Candler and maybe 1 or 2 others knew the complete process from start to finish. And here's the crucial part. Candler never ever considered patenting it. He understood that the moment he filed a patent, the moment that formula became public record, Coca-Cola's competitive advantage would begin eroding. Sure, he'd have legal protection for 17 years. But after that, anyone could make it. And even during those 17 years, competitors would be studying the formula, figuring out how to make similar products that didn't quite infringe the patent. By keeping it secret, Candler made Coca-Cola impossible to copy perfectly. Competitors tried. God knows they tried. Dozens of cola drinks launched in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Pepsi Cola, RC Cola, hundreds of smaller brands. Some of them got close, some of them tasted similar. But none of them could replicate Coca-Cola exactly because they didn't know exactly what was in it, and this created a fascinating psychological effect. The secrecy itself became part of the brand. The mystery became part of the appeal. People didn't just drink Coca-Cola because it tasted good. They drank it because it was special. Because there was something in it that they couldn't quite identify. Something secret. Something unique. The marketing leaned into this hard. Advertisements talked about the secret formula. About the special ingredients. About how Coca-Cola was different from every other drink on the market. And it worked. By the early 1900s, Coca-Cola wasn't just popular. It was becoming iconic. But the secret created problems too. Big problems. Because as Coca-Cola grew, as it expanded across the country and eventually around the world, maintaining that secrecy became incredibly difficult. The company needed multiple manufacturing facilities. They couldn't make everything in Atlanta and ship it everywhere. The costs would be too high. The product would take too long to reach customers. So they had to set up bottling operations in different cities. And each operation needed the syrup. The syrup that contained the secret formula. This created a dilemma. How do you distribute your secret formula to dozens or hundreds of locations without the secret getting out? How do you ensure that none of your employees talk? That none of your bottlers try to reverse engineer the recipe? That none of your competitors bribe their way to the information? The company's solution was brilliant and paranoid. They created what's known as Merchandise 7X. This is the part of the Coca-Cola formula that contains most of the flavoring ingredients. The secret part. And they manufactured it in only one location. A secure facility where access was tightly controlled. Only a handful of people were ever allowed in. Only they knew what went into merchandise 7X. Then they shipped this concentrated flavoring to their various bottling plants. The plants mixed it with sugar, water, carbon dioxide, and the other public ingredients. But they never knew what was in the flavoring itself. Even if someone at a bottling plant tried to analyze it, they'd find it incredibly difficult because it was already mixed and diluted in a way that masked the individual components. This system, with various modifications, is essentially what Coca-Cola still uses today. The formula is still kept secret. Manufacturing 7X is still done at a secure facility. The complete formula is still known by only a handful of executives. And here's the thing, it still works. Over a century later, despite all of modern chemistry, despite mass spectrometry and gas chromatography and every analytical tool we have, nobody has successfully reverse-engineered Coca-Cola. People have gotten close. Scientists have analyzed samples and identified most of the ingredients. But they can't get the ratios exactly right. They can't quite replicate the taste. Why? Because Pemberton and Candler's strategy worked. The trade secret proved more powerful than any patent ever could have been. If Coca-Cola had been patented in 1886, the patent would have expired in 1903. For the last 122 years, anyone could have made exact copies legally. There would be no Coca-Cola company as we know it. The brand would have become generic. But because it was kept secret, because the formula never entered the public domain, Coca-Cola maintained its competitive advantage indefinitely. And that advantage is worth hundreds of billions of dollars today. Now, I need to tell you about the myths, because the Coca-Cola secret has become so legendary that a lot of what people believe about it simply isn't true. Myth number 1. Only 2 people alive know the complete formula at any given time. This is probably not true. The company has never officially confirmed this. It's likely that several executives and key manufacturing personnel know the formula. The company just doesn't publicize who they are or how many there are. Myth number 2. The formula is locked in a vault that can only be opened by a specific ceremony involving multiple keys held by different people. This one is partially true, but highly exaggerated. In 2011, Coca-Cola moved the formula from a bank vault to a purpose-built vault at the World of Coca-Cola Museum in Atlanta. It's definitely secure, but the elaborate key ceremony stuff is mostly theater for visitors and marketing. Myth number 3. The formula has never changed since Pemberton created it. This is completely false. The formula has changed multiple times. In 1903, Coca-Cola removed most of the cocaine content from the coca leaf extract after public concerns about the drug. In 1985, they launched New Coke with a completely different formula, though they brought back the original after massive public backlash. They've adjusted sweeteners, changed carbonation levels, modified ingredient ratios. The formula today is not identical to what Pemberton made in 1886. Myth number 4. If the formula ever became public, Coca-Cola would collapse. This is the interesting one, because it's probably not true anymore. At this point, Coca-Cola's value isn't really in the formula. It's in the brand. It's in the global distribution network. It's in the marketing. If someone published the exact formula tomorrow, yes, some competitors might try to copy it. But they couldn't call it Coca-Cola. They couldn't use the trademark. They couldn't access Coca-Cola's supply chains and relationships. The formula is still important. The secrecy is still valuable. But Coca-Cola has become bigger than its secret recipe. The company is worth over $250 billion. The formula is just one piece of that value now. So why does the company still maintain the secrecy so aggressively? Why not just admit that the formula has been analyzed and approximated by chemists? Why keep up the mystique? Because the mystique is valuable. The secret itself is a marketing tool. Every time someone talks about Coca-Cola's secret formula, they're advertising the brand. Every documentary, every article, every conversation about the recipe reinforces the idea that Coca-Cola is special, different, unique, worth protecting. This is the ultimate outcome of Pemberton's decision not to patent. Whether he intended it or not, whether he even understood what he was doing, he created something more valuable than a protected formula. He created a legend, a mystery that would captivate people for generations. And here's the final twist. The decision not to patent became the template for countless other companies. Kentucky Fried Chicken keeps its blend of 11 herbs and spices secret. They never patented it. Mrs. Fields keeps her cookie recipe secret. Google keeps its search algorithm secret. Apple keeps its manufacturing processes secret. Countless companies across countless industries have learned the same lesson. Sometimes secrecy is better than legal protection. Sometimes mystery is more valuable than disclosure. Sometimes the best way to protect an innovation is to never tell anyone exactly how you did it. This is John Pemberton's real legacy. Not the formula itself. Not the drink, but the strategy. The understanding that some things become more valuable when they remain unknown. That competitive advantage can last forever if you never give your competitors the complete blueprint. Think about what would have happened if he had patented it. We'd know exactly what was in Coca-Cola. We'd have known since 1903. Dozens of companies would have copied it. The brand would mean less. The product would be less special. Coca-Cola might still exist, but it wouldn't dominate the global beverage market the way it does. Instead, Pemberton's morphine-addled desperation led to a decision that shaped business strategy for the next 140 years. The patent that was never filed became more valuable than any patent ever could have been. Of course, we should acknowledge the darker sides of this story. Pemberton died, broke and addicted, never seeing the empire his creation became. The early formula contained cocaine, which the company now admits but downplays. The aggressive business tactics Candler used to consolidate ownership were often ethically questionable. The secrecy that protected the formula also made it harder to regulate and understand what people were actually consuming. But from a pure business strategy perspective, from the question of how to protect an innovation, the Coca-Cola story is endlessly fascinating. It proves that sometimes the unconventional choice is the right one. That sometimes refusing to follow the standard path, refusing to file the patent, refusing to disclose, can create value that lasts far longer than legal protection ever could. Today, there are really only two types of intellectual property protection that matter for most innovations. Patents, where you disclose everything in exchange for temporary legal monopoly. And trade secrets, where you tell no one and hope you can maintain confidentiality forever. Most law schools teach that patents are better for most innovations. They're more certain, more enforceable, less risky. But Coca-Cola proves the opposite can be true. For the right kind of innovation, for something that's difficult to reverse engineer, for something where the recipe or process is complex enough that secrecy is maintainable, the trade secret approach can be far more powerful. The key is understanding which type of protection fits your innovation. If you've invented a new type of machine, patent it. Anyone who sees the machine can figure out how it works. Secrecy won't help you. But if you've invented a chemical formula, a recipe, a process that happens behind closed doors where nobody can observe it, maybe secrecy is the better choice. Pemberton probably didn't think through all of this. He was sick, desperate, and making decisions in survival mode. But his choice, accidental or otherwise, created something extraordinary. A secret that's lasted 140 years and counting. A competitive advantage that never expired. A legend that still captivates us today. The next time you drink a Coca-Cola, think about that. You're consuming a product whose exact composition is still unknown. Despite all our technology, all our analytical capabilities, all our chemical knowledge, we still can't quite figure out what's in the most consumed beverage on Earth. We know it's mostly sugar water and carbon dioxide. We know there's caffeine and some citric acid and caramel coloring. But the exact formula? The precise ratios? The specific ingredients in merchandise 7X? Still secret. That's the power of the patent that was never filed. That's the legacy of a morphine-addicted pharmacist who made a choice that changed business history forever. Not because he was a genius, not because he had some grand strategic vision, but because sometimes, in the chaos of desperation and failure and competition, the unconventional choice turns out to be the one that creates lasting value. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Innovation isn't just about creating something new. It's about understanding how to protect what you've created, how to maintain your advantage, how to ensure that your creation remains valuable not just for a few years, but for generations. Pemberton created the formula, but Candler understood the strategy. Together, accidentally, they created the blueprint for how to protect innovation through secrecy rather than disclosure. It's a blueprint that's still being followed today, still creating value, still protecting innovations from being copied and commoditized. The patent that was never filed taught the business world a lesson that patents themselves never could. Sometimes the best protection is no protection at all, just secrecy, mystery, and the endless human fascination with things we can't quite figure out. So hit subscribe if you want more stories like this.